As you may be aware that last week the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee investigating allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the criminal justice system made by the KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi focused strongly on submissions by the public and civil society groups. The submissions were made with the aim to strengthen the fight against corruption. One civil society group that presented to the committee is Accountability Now's advocate Paul Hoffman, and he joins us on our video link now to further expand on this conversation. So, Advocate, great to have you on the program this hour. So, Accountability Now made several submissions to the ad hoc committee, aimed at strengthening the fight against corruption. From your perspective, just what is the single most alarming issue currently facing the South African criminal justice system?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, and good morning to you and your viewers as well. The single most important issue is that corruption with impunity is rampant in South Africa. It is certainly present in institutions of state. It seems to have infected the tender system and crept out into politics and all manner of activities that ought to be conducted with compliance to the rule of law. So the point that we drove hardest with the members of the ad hoc committee, who gave us the privilege of being the first civil society organization to make submissions, was that the Constitutional Court has ruled that our law requires a body that is outside the control of the executive, doesn't report to a cabinet minister, in order to deal effectively with corruption in South Africa. Now, there is no such body, and the government of the day, both the GNU and its predecessors, have preferred to stick to the failed multi-agency approach to dealing with corruption. So you have hawks investigating, prosecutors prosecuting, and all manner of other institutions involved in task teams and hubs that are designed to deal with corruption on a multi-agency basis. In fact, what the court says is we require a single body to deal with corruption effectively, and in order to do so, it has to be outside the control of the executive. That decision was arrived at by looking at the Constitution itself and making sense of the obligation of the state to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the human rights that are guaranteed to all of us in the Bill of Rights, and also for the state to honor the obligations that it has undertaken in the international arena by signing international treaties that bind it to keep independent, keep and maintain, establish and finance independent anti-corruption machinery of state, something that we have slipped up on rather badly.
And before we continue to peel off the other layers, especially when we look at what you are calling for, right? What you're saying to me now points to somewhat of political will or lack thereof. Just what's the sense that you are getting from your vantage point at this point, especially when we look at how this raises questions about political will? Just in your assessment, Advocate, is corruption somewhat maybe being protected by what we're seeing from a political level, or is it being passively somewhat enabled by the lack of action?
Yes, I think you're quite right that those in positions of power in South Africa, maybe not so much in the GNU, but certainly before the GNU, seek to exercise hegemonic control of all the levers of power in society in general. And of course, having an anti-corruption body that is outside the control of the executive is absolutely not on the cards for people who think like that. Now, it seems that those people are becoming fewer and fewer, or are winning fewer and fewer votes in succeeding elections, because at this stage there are bills pending in Parliament that are introduced by Glynis Breitenbach, who is a member of the Ad Hoc Committee and used to be the Shadow Minister of Justice for the DA in the previous Parliament. And her bills envisage the creation of a new Chapter 9 institution, which she calls the Anti-Corruption Commission, and which will function in a way that complies with what the law requires. And this seemed to not be understood by too many members of the Ad Hoc Committee. They seem to think that Parliament can do as it pleases. Well, that's not the case. What Parliament has to do has to comply with the Constitution. And if it doesn't comply with the Constitution, either by way of laws that paint outside the lines of the Constitution or by way of conduct other than laws, then it is open to the public or to anybody who feels disaffected to approach the courts to have the conduct or the law declared unconstitutional. And then Parliament is sent back to the drawing board by the courts in order to remedy the unconstitutionality of what they have done.
And on that point, Advocate, so much has been said, especially when we look at the ad hoc committee itself and its work. Just what pointers should South Africans be looking out for that would signal that this is now, a genuine commitment in the fight against crime and corruption in the country?
Yes, I urged the committee to get behind the Breitenbach bills for that anti-corruption Chapter 9 institution. I'm not saying it's the only possible solution that the law offers, but our Chapter 9 institutions are all outside executive control, and they all manage to function with a reporting line to Parliament, to parliamentary portfolio committees, rather than to the executive, which is how the NPA and the police are required to report. The NPA reports to the Minister of Justice, and the police report to the Minister of Police, or the acting Minister of Police at the moment.
Yes, and looking at all of those outcomes as well, on the sidelines is the Nhlanhla Commission, which has also released its interim report recommending criminal investigations on several individuals. Did it go far enough? That's the question.
I can't answer that question because, unlike the President, I haven't seen the interim report of the Nhlanhla Commission. It's been kept confidential by the President, which is his prerogative. He's entitled to do that. But it seems that those who have been identified as prima facie involved in corruption or other wrongdoing are now going to be investigated at the instance of the President, who announced in the course of the week, I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, that he's not just sitting back and watching the Nhlanhla Commission float past him, he's actually responding. I'm afraid the response is a little underwhelming. It's a bit like asking the fox to look after the hen house, because if you're going to have police investigating police for corruption of those who have been fingered by the Nhlanhla Commission, you're not going to have the sort of progress that South Africa deserves on that front. If, however, a body outside executive control is given the opportunity of looking into corrupt activities wherever they may occur, including in the police and in the prosecution authority, then we do stand a better chance of getting on top of the rampant corruption that is really destroying our constitutional democracy. The former Chief Justice Zondo, who sat in his commission for years, has said, after the commission was finished for 2 years, said, listen, we need to take drastic action urgently if we want to have a country worthy of the name. That ought to be a wake-up call to those in Parliament who have the power to change the law by introducing the new Chapter 9 institution, or taking other steps that will render the dysfunction in the Criminal Justice Administration's capacity to deal with corruption a thing of the past. And the sooner that happens, the sooner the economy will improve, the sooner South Africa will thrive, and poverty and inequality, unemployment can be addressed properly.
And just to build up on what you are saying at this moment, Advocate, you know, so many hopes and aspirations of South Africans rest on all of these processes that are currently unfolding at this stage. Let's talk about your expectations of the ad hoc committee just going forward.
Look, if the ad hoc committee takes seriously what accountability now put before it, if it recognizes that it cannot do what pleases it or the cabinet, but has to do what the Constitution requires, then the words that were used by the Constitutional Court in the seminal Glenister case are that our law demands a body outside executive control to deal effectively with corruption. Now, that's not difficult to understand. It's in executive control if you have a reporting line to the Minister of Police and the Minister of Justice in relation to corrupt activities. And that means that what we have at the moment is limping. It is not constitutionally compliant. And all parliamentarians should recognize that the Constitution and the rule of law are supreme in South Africa, and they are not at liberty to do as they please or to duck and dive in the way that has happened in the past. The Constitutional Court has said that a specialized body of trained experts who are independent in their structure and in their operations, who have guaranteed resources and secure tenure of office, those are the people who will save us from the ravages of rampant corruption with impunity. And until that is done, and until Parliament seizes the nettle and makes the changes in the law that are required, we are really on a terrible downward trajectory towards failed statehood. The DA has the bills for the Anti-Corruption Commission that is envisaged in them, and those bills should enjoy the unanimous unanimous support of everybody in Parliament.
Right, that was Accountability Now Advocate Paul Hoffman on his presentation to the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee investigating the Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's corruption allegations.